If you're looking for cookie cutter, politically correct talk, then get the out. You're listening to ConservaRican and Friends on WAAR Radio. The track hits your eardrum like a slug to your chest. Got a vest for your Jimmy in the city of sex. We in that sunshine state where the bomb ass him be. The state where you never find a dance floor empty and pimp speed. On a mission for them greens. Lean, mean, money making machines, serving fiends. I've been in the game for 10 years making rap tunes. Ever since Honeys was wearing Sassoon. Now it's 95 and they clock me and watch me diamond shining, looking like a Rob to the pay. Your city is the bomb if your city making pay. Throw up a finger if you feel the same way. Straight putting it down for California, yeah. West Coast.
Okay, here on the special ConservaRican and Friends Tuesday afternoon schmooze. This is Julio Rivera, and I'm here. I wanted to talk a little bit about this past weekend's event. I know a lot of people expected me to broadcast from the First in the Nation Presidential Townhall, the anticlimactic event featuring the best of the rest. Everybody who was there is running behind in the polls. Obviously, for the most part, to the leader, Donald Trump and Ted Cruz, who are surging in Iowa. It was kind of a boring event. I got to be honest. It was kind of exciting to see some of the people, up close and personal. I had never actually met Rand Paul. I was able to actually encounter him for a brief moment. A lot of these guys refused to answer questions. The whole setup was nuts. I was sent there by WAAR. Wayne told me to go down there. They were going to set up supposedly a radio row, and I was supposed to be able to do my show from there. And I get there, and Radio Row is basically a press room. So it was basically set up like a high school cafeteria. There were a million reporters there. Everybody's sitting there buzzing, talking on their cell phones. There was absolutely no way to do radio. So for everybody who expected continuing coverage of First in the Nation Presidential Townhall from WAAR Radio, I do apologize. I did write an article, which is actually this is probably the first and last article that I'll probably ever write. I was completely bashed for writing an article regarding what was actually going on there, because all I had to work with was who was there. So people were like, well, why are you writing about this candidate or that candidate? First of all, I want to let you guys know, and anybody who knows me even remotely knows, that I am Mr. Ted Cruz. I'm a huge fan of Cruz. I've been proud of the way he's railed against the establishment. He's what I call the C-SPAN superstar, because there's so many clips of him going after Harry Reid, going after Mitch McConnell, going after, not being afraid to go after members of the party, establishment members. He didn't, as he likes to say, go there to, get along, go along to get along with what was going on. Obviously he knows that there's a problem with the establishment and the way that they're really, honestly, continually dicking us, the taxpayer. So basically, what wound up occurring was, I did a little bit of live tweeting from there, and if you were following my social media, you saw that. The next couple of weekends, we will be in New Hampshire. I will be doing short clips from New Hampshire, as I will be at Camp Cruz, kind of taking a look at what's going on there, and in anticipation of the New Hampshire primary coming up on February 9th. Very important one. Obviously, we have the Iowa caucuses coming up on February 1st. Polls have shown Cruz as high up as 10 points over Trump. Some have shown him kind of in a dead heat with the margin for error. So in a really socially conservative area, a lot is expected from him, as far as to do well there, leading up to what will occur in New Hampshire on February 9th. The big news, actually, when we're in New Hampshire, is that for some reason, God knows for what reason, John Kasich seems to be doing well there. As of the polling on Saturday, he was either second or third. I think the Real Clear Politics average had him actually at second as of Saturday, which actually as of Sunday, Cruz jumped back into second place. I guess he had picked up some big endorsement there. But really, it was a dead crowd. I don't know if that's maybe speaks to the people in New Hampshire, or maybe because they weren't as excited because Trump was not there, Cruz was not there. The real heavy hitters didn't show up for this particular event, as they were campaigning, at the 11th hour to try to see what they can do in Iowa to win that very important caucus coming up. Basically, we're in a situation here where we really have to win. The Republican Party, hopefully it'll be Cruz, which is what the real conservatives should be actually wanting and hoping for, because honestly, Bernie Sanders is surging, and that is scary. That's a very scary possibility. It looks like Hillary Clinton, at this point, if she's not indicted, we're probably going to wind up either with her or Sanders. And because of all the negative press going her way, it's looking like the socialist Sanders has a real opportunity here to step in and win the Democratic nomination. And putting him on a big ticket like that, you really don't know what you're going to get. You never know whether or not the establishment's going to try to pull a rabbit out of its hat and, try to put their candidate up there. I think that they've been trying to attempt to consolidate support by running so many moderate candidates in this primary. I mean, you have the support that Cruz has, you have the support that Trump has, but if you go ahead and you add up, the Rubio supporters, the Bush supporters, the Kasich supporters, the Gilmore. We've had so many, Christie is still in the mix. You never really know what you're going to get once these people show up to the polls. And even more scary, what's going to happen at the convention. Because as we've learned over the last couple of months, the GOP has some funny rules as far as the way that they can, what they can do with the delegates as far as supporting certain candidates. So it can come into play where we have a contested convention, which at that point, God knows what will happen. And if it does push perhaps Trump out of the Republican running, you don't know whether or not he would look to run as a third party candidate. There was some talk a couple of months ago where I believe it was a stat that was actually all over social media, where 68% of Trump supporters say that they would support him in a third party run. If you look at the formula to the 92 election where Bill Clinton won, A big part of the reason why he won was because of vote splitting between Ross Perot and H.W. Bush. And that actually is something that a lot of people have pointed to with Trump. Is he a Clinton plant? Is he really still a liberal? One of the things that I've been looking into it has been like some of the people that have that Trump has actually donated to. I know that he uses, the old saying that, I'm a businessman. When you're in business and you're trying to get things done, sometimes you got to get into bed with these politicians. And I can buy that if he's giving money exclusively only to New York candidates or New Jersey candidates where he does the majority of his building. The truth of the matter is, if you've given to Harry Reid, Tom Daschle, like those types of politicians, what benefit did that have to his business? There's no answer to it other than that he's a liberal. Really, I mean, if you want to lie to yourself and tell yourself that he's some sort of reformed conservative at this point, I'll tell you this much. Everything that he said since June, I've, for the most part, been in agreement with. But he's only been saying it since June. When you get young kids that are liberals, a lot of times they don't know any better. And when they go ahead and finally have that epiphany and they become conservative, I can buy that because they knew no better. Really, they had no idea. They were kids. When you're a kid, you're idealistic. You have no idea the real cost of anything. You don't know the way the government works, the way the taxation system works, big government. Big government begets big government. There's no rollback plan. These people in D.C. want to necessitate themselves, and they're not looking to cut back. There is really no conservative politicians in D.C. outside of Cruz and a handful of people, that stand by his side. You have your Mike Lees, you have your Jeff Sessions, you have your Steve Kings, you have a certain, a small little cluster, and they stand up and attempt to rail against the establishment. But in a lot of instances, they're outnumbered by obviously there's 435 members of the House. There's 100 members in the Senate. When you're dealing with a small handful of people, it's hard to really get conservative legislation passed, and that's why it's more important than ever to get the right guy in the big chair. Because ultimately, the one thing that I have noticed is you do have a lot of guys now that we have a Republican Congress, we have a Republican Senate. They sit there and they espouse these conservative values. They sit there and say that, we're trying to get Obamacare repealed. We're trying to do this. We're trying to do that. But ultimately, they know that these bills are going to end in a veto. And Obama does have veto power. That's why it's important to get somebody in there who's willing to sign a bill that's going to reduce spending, that's going to put an end to Obamacare, that's going to deregulate so the private sector can prosper. Obviously we need tax reform to get to that. We have a record number of people outside of the workforce at this point. The country's really in trouble. And that's why I'm kind of shocked and a little bit ashamed of my fellow conservatives that they've been able to sit there and really get behind the Trump candidacy. Conservatives, we pride ourselves on being the more intelligent. We're fact finders. We look to see who's saying what. We hold people accountable for what they say. With Trump, you really have no record. He's just going by what he says, and we're supposed to take it as gospel. I honestly don't have a problem with Trump's message. What I have a problem with is that he's the messenger of that message. I don't trust the guy. And I'm shocked that conservatives have kind of, gotten behind him in the numbers that they have. When you have someone who's shown a willingness to be combative, and that's really what we need. I think when Trump said that, Ted Cruz is kind of a jerk and nobody wants to do business with him. That's exactly what I want in a candidate. That's Trump's basically saying, I'm going to go to D.C. with the intention of playing ball. And if that's his intention, why should we vote him in? And why should we want him as conservatives? It's insane. I don't understand the reason why people are going to allow the country to remain in this trap of big progressive government by bringing in somebody who is happy to usurp the Constitution when it benefits him. If we don't have a true constitutional defender, and one of the points that I wanted to make about Cruz is, prior to him going to the Senate, in the capacity of Solicitor General of the state of Texas, he went continually in front of the Supreme Court in defense of constitutional values. As a matter of fact, he had more cases in front of the Supreme Court than any Solicitor General in the history of Texas, defending constitutional values, freedom of religion, the Second Amendment, the sovereignty of the state of Texas. And that's an important one when you consider the centralized power of the federal government. States should still have the right to make decisions for themselves. That's constantly what the federal government is railing against. They want to do these big, broad, sweeping, one-size-fits-none sort of government solutions, and it doesn't help the taxpayer. It doesn't help the private citizen of that state. It doesn't help anybody who believes in their own religious liberty, their Second Amendment, or any of the rights that we were guaranteed under the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Today is a very special episode. We're joined actually by Sabo, the street artist, the great one, the man who's notorious for his hits on liberal politicians. He was involved very famously in the Texas gubernatorial election when he attacked Wendy Davis, who he called, or he created the abortion Barbie. In addition to that, most of you know him from the shirtless cruise. And actually, he's taken that to a different level to where it's not just from the street anymore. And he's actually, the Cruz campaign has actually put on tedcruz.org in their shop a special section for his merchandise. In addition to that, you can find him on unsavoryagents.com, and he's here with. And tell us what's the deal? How are you doing today?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, fantastic, man. We're so excited to have you. We showed a montage at the beginning of the show of some of your more powerful images, and you've constantly gone out and attacked the liberal left, the hypocrisy of a lot of the celebrities in D.C. One of the things in particular, and something that always sticks in my mind, was recently, or actually maybe a couple of months back, but Gwyneth Paltrow, who is a mindless celebrity and knows nothing of the way that the real world works because she lives in her little Hollywood bubble, had the nerve to say that she wishes that Obama had enough power to kind of exercise whatever he wanted to do at his will, which is, in direct violation to the Constitution. What's your actual thought on basically the mindset of these entitled celebrities that you see, because you're in Hollywood, California yourself?
Hey, man, when I see a homeless person taking a dump in the middle of the street, I don't bother to try and figure out what's going on in his head. It's the same thing with these idiot celebrities. I just can't relate with whatever's rolling around in those stupid little heads of theirs.
Yeah, what do you think? Why do you think is the reason that they have such a stranglehold on pop culture and media at this point? Like the kids really just unconditionally believe what they have to say.
Well, because liberals are very smart. I mean, from the second you're born, pretty much, your parents put you in front of a television, and all you hear is Democrats are the good guys, Republicans are the bad guys. And then you go to school, The teachers tell you the Democrats are the good guys, the Republicans are the bad guys. You go to college, same thing happens. And it's just, you turn on television, same thing happens. You go to the movies, same thing happens. You listen to music, the musicians, the songs are telling you the same damn thing. After a while, it's just second nature. They have it, they own it. And somewhere's down the line, we as Republicans just let them have their way with that. I mean, how we aren't creative is just so beyond me. Well, no, it's not. The thing is, when you decide to become a creative, you're just conditioned to believe that I'm a creative, so I'm a leftist. There's your answer right there.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that's really scary is the way that liberals have infected the educational system. That's something that I'm particularly scared of. I know with Common Core, as a single parent, I've seen an example of some of the teachings, especially like in social studies. First of all, social studies is a total sham. Prior to the 60s, they used to teach a class called civics, where people learned about their constitutional rights. And it kind of showed you the structure of the way that our government was intended to work under the framers. Since then, it seems like the social justice lobby has kind of dug its claws into the heartstrings of the educational system. And some of the assignments that I see my daughter bring home from school are particularly shocking. I know that there was one in particular, because I know that the immigration issue has been a real galvanizing issue, one way or the other. People either have the wrong side, they're either on the wrong side of the argument or they're on the right side of the argument, where we have a right to our sovereignty and whatnot. But there was one particular assignment which showed where they were building a road towards citizenship. And they had a Democrat laying bricks towards this road towards, coming to the United States of America. And they tried to portray the Republicans as picking up those same bricks and pulling them off the road, as to say that we have an issue with legal immigration. The majority of the world, outside of the United States of America, we're the only ignoramuses at this point that just allow people into this country freely. And I don't understand why people don't get the fact that we have a right to our sovereignty, we have a right to our culture as Americans, to not allow people from all these other countries to try to come into the United States and change the way that we live our lives from day to day.
Yeah, well, my whole take on that is, we are a melting pot, or at least that's how I grew up thinking. Mm-hmm. And I don't have a problem with anyone coming here, so long as you assimilate and you do it legally. Mm-hmm. And when I said that Republicans just aren't creative, I mean, how we're not able to come up with a line, come up with a narrative that states just that to counter their argument is just so beyond me. I mean, when you listen to a Democrat bash us in the head and say, well, we're the ones taking up the bricks while they're the ones laying them down, you mean to tell me there's not a Republican out there that's creative enough or smart enough to say, excuse me, that's not the case, this is the case, and do it in such a way that's as powerful as the illustration that you had mentioned?
Yeah. You know what I think it is? I think there's a lot of fear of being offensive. I think that political correctness has really killed our country. I think it started really when we elected the half-black president that we have. Because he's every bit as black as he is white. So, I mean, I don't want to hear this nonsense.
Yeah, well, you know what makes it hard, or what gives them power, is when you do back down, or when you do apologize, or when you are politically correct. Because what you're basically doing is you're kneeling to them. And it's like, I mean, when you stand your ground, when you say, this is what I mean, prove to me that I'm wrong, or show me how I'm wrong, and they can't, that's all you need. If they're who the hell cares if an idiot hates you? What you have to do is rally people that think like you. That way you can get a little piece of that power back.
Yeah, no, that's an absolutely a great point. But, we saw, especially now, the one thing that I really have a problem with, and this recently occurred, was they passed the omnibus bill. The omnibus bill was really a fiscal disaster. It's over $1 trillion of spending. A lot of the things that are in the, omnibus bill are not in the interest of our national security. There's absolutely nothing, and there's already supposed to have been over 700 miles of border fencing already put together. There was spending inside that omnibus bill to allow for over 300,000 visas from majority Muslim countries, where we know for a fact, and the FBI director has even told no possible way that we can vet these people to let them into this country. So we're pretty much right now the same open spigot that we have, that we're losing jobs through, and that the social programs and the entitlement spending is being sucked through, that's coming through the southern border, is going to come through legally through visas, coming in through Middle Eastern countries at this point. So, I mean, we're really in a dangerous position, especially when you consider the constant, the recent executive orders on Second Amendment stuff. They don't want Americans to be able to defend themselves against potential threats.
Yeah, there's consequences to not voting or voting a certain way. It's like, unfortunately for the next year, we're just going to have to bend over and take it, and with a smile. I mean, this guy's in office, and he's going to do as much damage as he can before he leaves. And he's not like your normal lame duck person. I honestly don't care. I honestly don't think he cares if he winds up costing a lot of Democrat seats because of his actions before he leaves, the way most normal politicians would. But I mean, you were asking, why the liberals are so strong. It's like, the liberals are so strong is because they never stop. They are 24/7 pushing for what they believe in. And Republicans, we're nice people. We want to go to work, raise our kids, go bass hunting, have a barbecue. It's like, that's all good and well. But until we realize that we have to be as tenacious as they are, they're going to keep kicking our asses.
Yeah, that's funny, too. That was a point that actually Ed Cruz had made. He said that Barack Obama will crawl through broken glass with a bayonet in his mouth to try to advance his agenda. And that's the truth. We have completely laid down on any principle. I'm at the point now, honestly, because I am registered as a Republican. New Jersey is one of those states where in order to participate in the primary, you have to actually be registered as a member of the party, which in a lot of states, amazingly, I've learned this through this election cycle, you don't have to be. So in a lot of states, Democrats are going to be voting in our primary, screwing everything up. But I don't identify with the values of the party anymore, what they're actually currently executing. The purest Republican values, certainly, because those are constitutional conservative values. But this party is anything but at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if I told you 2 years ago you should vote for a Republican who's going to make deals with Democrats, if I told you 2 years ago to vote for a Republican who is pro late-term abortion or any of those other things, you would have told me I was nuts. And here we are 2 years later, and having these morons are pushing for Trump. I mean, you can't make this up. And I mean, as far as values go, we all know where his values are. I sit here in awe. The past few weeks, the past couple months, wondering what exactly happened. I mean, I've been doing what I do for a long time, and it's only been the past year, if not two, that people have like woke up and said, "Whoa, we're totally getting screwed." It's like, excuse me, you've been getting screwed for going on 5 years now, 7. Is that you're just now waking up? And these are the same freaks that are pulling for Trump. I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah, and it's funny too because I've butted heads with a lot of conservatives that I've respected, that I've looked up to, in the party. When you're an activist or you're trying to be a voice in the party, there's a lot of people that are a little bit more established, and you look to them, and a lot of them have turned into these Trump-tards, and it just doesn't make any sense to me because he's a guy that, the vetting process will tell you exactly who he is. And the positions that he's normally had, he's been in the media, he's been quoted so many times as a fan and a champion of progressive policy. And he's given to a lot of these progressive politicians. And for us to just be able to take him at his word and believe that somehow he's this changed man or he's seen the light. And one of the things that's the most insulting, all these guys, when you get, whether it's, Cruz, obviously, or even a Rubio or whoever. They're these great orators of conservative policy. They go up there, whether or not they're your guy or whether or not you agree with them 100%, they'll sit there and they'll really explain to you what their positions are, and they'll really get on the record as far as what they say they're going to do. Trump gives these rudimentary, like these third-grade answers to everything that he does. It's almost as if he considers conservatives stupid and that he can tell them anything that they want to hear and that they're just going to buy it as gospel. But the scary thing is that they are.
I was looking at his rallies. He has these huge rallies, and I was thinking, this reminds me of something. I just couldn't pin it down. And then one day I was like, they remind me of all those wrestling events I used to see as a kid. It's like all those idiots that go to these wrestling shows, they're now packing the arenas for him. And one night I was just for shits and giggles, I was going to I Googled in Trump, World Wrestling, whatever. And sure enough, there he is. Arnold Schwarzenegger, wrestling. Sure enough, there he is. And who's that other guy? Jesse Ventura.
Jesse the Body, yep.
Yeah, Jesse the Body. They managed to pull in all these idiots. And don't get me wrong. And the ones, and I expect it. It's sad, I expect it. But what really disappoints me is I know people whose hearts are in the right place. They don't piss themselves because they actually have brains. They know not to. And I mean, they don't drool or stutter. They're not dumb people. And they jump ship. All of a sudden, they're voting for Trump. I'm like, why? You're voting for a Democrat. It doesn't make sense. But I'm rambling. I mean,
every point that you're making is absolutely true. You know, it's one thing. When you were saying this reminded me of something, I thought you were going to go in a different direction. And actually, part of what it reminds me of, and I'm not comparing him to this person, but it kind of reminds me of a little bit of the rise of the Nazi Party or Hitler in a sense. Because a lot of times what you have to grab is you have to grab people's emotions. And it seems like Trump's been good at finding a way to really resonate with people. And, you know, I'm going to be honest, and this is probably going to piss a lot of people off. The majority of the country really is stupid. So I can understand if Democrats are coming over to his side, because most of the time they don't really vet candidates properly. I think that if people had an idea of the history of Barack Obama before the 2008 election, I don't think he would have ever won a presidency in a center-right country, even against a very uninspiring candidate in McCain. I really don't think that if people knew that this was what they were going to get.
Well, see, the thing is they did know. The thing is they were told. The thing is they didn't want to hear it. And it's kind of like when Trump stood up and said, I could stand on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I won't lose any voters. I mean, the difference between him and Obama is Obama had the taste to not come out and say that.
Yeah, that's true. And that's something that's really funny with Trump, because listen, I'm not a perfect person. You know, I've got my flaws and whatever. Like I would never elect somebody to the presidency like myself. You know what I mean? That's the reason why I look for somebody who's a real stalwart as far as, you know, their values and you know, a good decent human. Not that I'm not a good decent human being, but you know what I mean? Like Trump is somebody who's been involved. He screwed over so many people in business. I'm from the state of New Jersey. And actually one of my closer friends works for a construction company that got screwed out of a big invoice for one of his companies. And you know what it is? Trump is the type of guy that'll get away with whatever he can get away with. And when you put somebody like that in a position of power, ultimately that's only going to lead to subjugation of the citizens.
Yeah, and you know, you got to read between the lines. When Trump says something, I didn't take money from anybody. This is my own campaign. I funded it myself. What he's pretty much saying, if you read between the lines, is I don't know anyone's shit. Mm-hmm. He pretty much paid for the presidency. And now you got this Bloomberg character that's saying he may spend $1 billion to run for the Democrats. What this is turning into is who can buy the presidency. And, you know, that's not what's intended. I mean, or money in politics. I mean, you have to show your face somehow. Advertising costs money. You know, it's just a matter of, are you going to sell your soul for it? And
yeah, exactly. That's really what's scary too. And the other thing too is there's a perception that Trump is above the machine, like that. You know, people go, oh well, you know, the banks can't own me. this and that. And he actually went so far as to say that, somehow Cruz, because he took a secured loan that was secured by his own property, much like any American would take out a mortgage to fund, I guess, his senatorial campaign. He took out his own money to do that. That Trump, doesn't belong to any banks. You know how much money Trump has actually screwed banks out of? Whether it was by filing for bankruptcy. And actually, a lot of the properties and a lot of his business endeavors are funded by banks. So for him to try to make the implication that somehow he owes nothing to big banks or to Wall Street, that's nonsense to anybody. The only people that are believing it are the same people that are believing his little, elementary kind of communication that he's getting over with right now. And he's actually doing very well with it, amazingly so.
Well, Trump's people know that the majority of the voters out there aren't smart enough to know the difference between having someone donate you money and expect something in return versus you getting a loan against your own assets. I mean, having to explain that to him, the guy's not wearing tights and he's not all greased up in oil. So you have to be a little more, slower with them. But I mean, when you hear an individual say, well, Trump's not a politician, the hell he's not. I mean, if you were to ask what the problems are in Washington, the two answers you usually hear are the lobbyists and the politicians. He's a lobbyist. I mean, that's the difference between a hooker and a John. I mean,
it's nuts too, and that's one of the things too. Like his tax system that he's come up with is a little bit more of a progressive tax system, which still kind of makes it to where lobbying still exists. My theory on lobbying is that if you come up with a flat business tax, that eliminates the need for like 90% of lobbying, because most of the lobbying is done by these industries that want to get tax breaks. So once the tax, the corporate tax rate becomes flat and we don't need the IRS anymore, there's not a need for lobbyists. That's one of the reasons that I was such a big fan of Cruz's tax plan.
And maybe that's why the establishment likes someone who's not going to do away with lobbyists.
Yeah,
the IRS.
And the entire alphabet soup of bureaucracies. Because, I mean, that's the reason why a lot of these larger corporations thrive over smaller or mid-sized businesses, because they're able to get around rules. They get special rules only for them. And ultimately, that's why, to me, point blank, the biggest threat to the way that things are going right now, the status quo, is somebody who's going to be for a flat tax, somebody who's going to get rid of a lot of those alphabet bureaucracies. And ultimately, there's really only one candidate who's willing to do that. And, that's been Senator Cruz the entire time.
Yeah, we know who the Democrats are. All I can say is by the time this all blows over, I'm just happy to know that we've really shed some light on who the Republicans are, who the establishment is, what it means to be in the establishment, how they're just as much in bed with money and politics and big donors as any Democrat. I don't know. Yeah, all I can say is if by some miracle Ted Cruz manages to make it to the White House and he winds up being just as bad as the rest, at that point I'm just going to hang it up. I'm just going to say, you know what? I guess that's just the way the machine is.
Yeah, I'm going to be very afraid if that happens. I think that's what those FEMA camps are for people like us.
Yeah.
They're going to be getting rid of our asses, I'll tell you that much, because they're not going to want anybody standing against the system. The one scary thing is that, we got one chance to get it right. Trump has thrown a real monkey wrench into getting that done. And we're right at it's the 11th hour, man. We're going to have Iowa. We're going to have New Hampshire. And, I think after that, things are going to shape up quickly, and we're going to have a great idea of, moving forward, who's going to be, truly the front runner and have a chance to win. I want to thank you so much for coming on. You've been a fabulous guest. We're big fans of your work. unsavoryagents.com. If you'd like to give us some more information as far as where people can find you and purchase your products, let us know right now.
No, that's it. unsavoryagents.com. Thanks a lot. And keep in mind, I am a businessman. But my country means more to me than, oh, shit, I just pissed off some Trump people who could buy shit from me. No, I want my country. And if I can have a business in that country, more power to me, man.
Awesome.
I want it to exist.
That's the American dream, and that's what it's all about. And that was Sabo, and this is ConservaRican and Friends. We'll be on tomorrow night at our regular time. You can catch this podcast right now on YouTube, www.youtube.com. Look up Julio Rivera, ConservaRican. Thank you so much for joining us. It was really a privilege to have you on today. And catch us tomorrow night when we'll be broadcasting at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, Wednesday. Thank you.